John stood frozen in the middle of the supermarket aisle, a carton of milk slipping from his grasp, shattering against the linoleum. Martha Jenkins, his neighbor, had just asked him, "Heard Susan's found herself a new project?" A sly, knowing grin twisted her mouth, and the cashier behind her watched, eyes wide. The cold indifference in Martha's voice cut deeper than any blade. John Miller eased his worn Ford F-150 into the driveway, the gravel crunching under the tires like old bones. 2 days early from Chicago, the flat Midwestern sky promised nothing but more gray. He cut the engine, the sudden silence of the suburban street pressing in. His gaze drifted across the asphalt, past the neatly trimmed lawns to Martha Jenkins' house. She was out by her mailbox, a blue envelope clutched in her hand. Her head turned slowly, catching his eye. A brief nod, not friendly, not distant, just a look that seemed to hold too much information. He felt a prickle on the back of his neck, a sensation he couldn't quite place. The front door opened with a familiar squeak. The house, usually bustling, was strangely still. No late afternoon news blaring from the living room television. No faint clatter of pots and pans from the kitchen. No scent of Susan's pot roast or tuna casserole. The air hung heavy, a kind of pre-storm quiet. He dropped his duffel bag by the coat rack, the thud echoing a little too loudly in the hallway. A faint strain of music reached him from upstairs. At Last by Etta James. Susan liked that song, always had. He pictured her humming along, maybe taking a late nap on their king-size bed, the afternoon light softening her features. He thought about surprising her, maybe picking up some Chinese takeout, a rare weeknight treat. He climbed the carpeted stairs, each step a soft compression. The music grew clearer, the brass section swelling, Etta James's voice full and resonant. It wasn't coming from the bedroom stereo, though. It seemed to be drifting from the ensuite bathroom, the door slightly ajar. He paused outside their bedroom, a small smile playing on his lips. He imagined her soaking in the tub, maybe a candle burning, a moment of peace before he descended with his unexpected presence. He pushed the bedroom door open a little wider. The room was dim, the curtains drawn. He stepped closer to the bathroom entrance, the music now almost jarring in its volume. Through the narrow gap in the bathroom door, he saw a flash of movement. A vibrant red, a material he didn't recognize. He saw Susan. She was facing the mirror, her back mostly to him. Her hand, steady and precise, was applying deep red lipstick, carefully outlining her mouth. Not the everyday shade she wore, but a bold, almost aggressive crimson. The dress was a sheath of that same bright red, form-fitting, shimmering under the soft bathroom light. It was new. He had never seen it before. It wasn't her style, not for a Wednesday evening at home. It wasn't even her style for a dinner out with him. A cold, hard knot formed in his stomach. The realization, dull at first, then sharp, hit him. She wasn't just getting ready. She was dressing up for someone else. "Going somewhere special?" he asked, his voice sounding distant, almost a stranger's, as he pushed the bathroom door fully open. Susan's hand holding the lipstick jerked violently. A vivid red streak slashed across her right cheek like a wound. She spun around, her eyes wide, the bright red dress swirling around her. There was no flicker of guilt in her expression, only a sudden raw anger. "John, you're supposed to be in Chicago," she gasped, her voice high-pitched, as she automatically brought her hand up to wipe at the lipstick smear. The red just smudged, making it worse. He leaned against the doorframe, the wood cool against his forearm. His heart hammered against his ribs, a frantic, desperate rhythm. "Meeting wrapped up early," he said, his words measured, carefully neutral. "Thought I'd surprise you." He let his gaze linger on the unfamiliar red dress, then on the bright, flustered anger in her eyes. "Looks like I'm not the only one full of surprises tonight." Susan's face, initially frozen in surprise, quickly thawed into something harder. A practiced irritation he knew well. She smoothed the front of the red dress, adjusting a strap that didn't need adjusting. Her movements were quick, almost jerky, as she tried to regain composure. She grabbed a small, ornate silver compact from the counter and dabbed at the lipstick smear on her cheek, though it only seemed to spread the bright crimson further into her skin. "I'm going out with the girls," she stated, her voice tight, turning back to the mirror, her reflection avoiding his eyes. Brenda's birthday. I told you last week. The words hung in the air, thin and brittle. John felt the cold shock of it. Brenda Hayes' birthday was in October. He remembered because he'd helped Susan pick out a cashmere scarf for her every year since they'd been married. April was still shedding its last damp chills, the trees barely budding, nowhere near October. The blatant lie, delivered with such practiced ease, stung a specific, deep part of him. It wasn't just a betrayal. It was an insult to his intelligence, a dismissal of their shared history. "Must be some birthday party," he said, his voice flat, observing her reflection in the mirror. She continued to fuss with her hair, her fingers a blur. "That's quite a dress for a girls' night out." He let his gaze drift over the shimmering fabric, the way it clung to her figure, the plunging neckline. It was not a dress for laughing over wine with Brenda and her usual crowd at Applebee's. Susan snapped the lipstick cap shut with a sharp, echoing click. She turned fully to face him now, her eyes narrowed. "What's that supposed to mean? I'm not allowed to dress up now? Is that it, John? You want me in a potato sack? Is that it?" Her voice rose, taking on a familiar defensive edge. John pushed away from the doorframe, taking a slow step forward into the bathroom. The air grew heavy, thick with unspoken accusations. He kept his voice low, almost a whisper, but it carried a weight that made her flinch. "Is that what this is about, Susan? Feeling good about yourself?" He paused, letting the implication hang. "Or feeling good for someone else?" Her face contorted, morphing from defensiveness to outright rage. She whirled, her red dress swirling around her. "Oh, here we go," she spat, throwing her hands up in exasperation. "This is exactly why I can't do anything without you turning it into an interrogation. God, you're impossible." He ignored the outburst. His eyes were fixed on the small leather purse sitting on the vanity counter beside her. It was a new one, too, a small, sleek clutch he hadn't seen. He walked past her, his movement deliberate, unhurried, cutting off her path to the counter. His hand reached out. "John, don't you dare!" she cried, her voice cracking now, the anger dissolving into something closer to panic. She lunged, a desperate, clumsy move, trying to snatch the purse before he could reach it. But he was faster. His fingers closed around the smooth leather. With a quick flick, he opened it, pulling out a folded piece of paper. It was a receipt, thick and glossy, from the Grove Hotel, room 712, paid in Guay. His thumb traced the date. 2 nights ago, the first night he was supposed to be in Chicago. He held it up, letting her see it, his voice a low thrum. "Smart," he conceded, a bitter taste in his mouth. "Except you used your credit card at the hotel bar last time, remember? Made it too easy to track." He remembered seeing the charge on their joint statement, dismissed it as a work lunch, a quick drink with a friend. The pit in his stomach had started then. He let the silence stretch for a moment, letting the facts sink in. "Brenda's birthday party at the Grove?" he asked, the sarcasm a thin, sharp blade. He watched her face drain of color, the red lipstick on her cheek a stark contrast against her pale skin. "Funny," he added, his gaze unwavering. "I didn't know they did party packages. Same room as last month, isn't it?" The color drained from Susan's face, leaving it a stark white beneath the smear of red lipstick. Then, slowly, a furious flush crept up her neck, staining her cheeks and forehead. The practiced anger, the defensive posturing, all of it crumbled, leaving behind a raw, ugly anger that twisted her features. Her eyes, still wide, narrowed into slits. She pulled her arms tight across her chest, a self-protective gesture, but the anger was a shield, not a sign of retreat. "How long have you known?" she asked, her voice flat, devoid of any inflection. It was a challenge, not a question seeking information. "Long enough," John replied, the words clipped, precise. The truth was, he'd only stumbled upon the first hotel receipt 2 weeks ago. A careless envelope, tucked behind the old stack of utility bills, the details stark and unsettling. The first flicker of suspicion had ignited then, a cold ember in his gut that had slowly spread. He'd recognized the pattern. He'd done his quiet, methodical research, confirming his suspicions, pulling together the sparse details, careful not to alert her. "Long enough to know this isn't the first time," he continued, watching her closely. "Long enough to know his name is Mark Carlson." Susan laughed then, a sharp, humorless sound that scraped against the quiet of the bathroom. It was a harsh, bitter noise, utterly devoid of joy, and it hit John with the physical force of a punch. He flinched, almost imperceptibly. Well, look who finally decided to pay attention to something besides his precious work, she taunted, the words dripping with contempt. She shook her head slowly, a sneer twisting her mouth. Took you long enough, didn't it, John? Don't, John warned, his voice low, a quiet rumble that hoped to cut through her rising fury. But she was past hearing, past caring. The dam had broken, and a torrent of words, long held back, now rushed forth. She took a step closer, her voice rising in pitch and volume. Don't you dare act like you're some innocent party in this. For 5 years, John, 5 years, all you've cared about is that next promotion, that next project, those endless trips to Chicago or Milwaukee or God knows where else. You come home, you eat the dinner I make, you watch your sports center, and then you fall asleep. You think I haven't noticed? She gestured wildly around the perfectly tiled bathroom, the expensive fixtures gleaming under the lights. Don't talk to me about this perfect little life, John. Don't talk about how I've been dying of boredom in this perfect little house while you jet off, living your exciting life. John felt a familiar confusion, a hot surge of incredulity. He worked. He provided. He thought he was doing everything right. So this is my fault, he asked, his voice strained, a raw edge to it. You're sleeping with another man because I work hard to give you this life, this house, this car, everything we have? He swept a hand around the room, encompassing their shared world and the tangible results of his effort. No, she shot back, her denial sharp, absolute. Her eyes blazed with a manic energy. No, I'm sleeping with another man because he makes me feel alive. She paused, her chest heaving, her gaze challenging him. When I'm with him, I'm not just someone's wife or someone's mother. I'm me again. The words hung in the air, a desperate plea and a vicious accusation wrapped into one. Her voice dropped, a sudden, almost vulnerable tone entering it, though her eyes remained hard. When was the last time you made me feel like that, John? Looked at me the way he does? A hot, pulsing fury roared in John's ears, a primal urge to yell, to shatter the delicate porcelain sink, to break something real and tangible. The red dress, the lipstick smear, the cutting words, they all swirled into a blinding haze. But 20 years navigating the quiet, predatory waters of corporate law had taught him control. He'd learned to compartmentalize, to keep a cool head even when the stakes were highest. This moment, he knew, was the highest. He took a deep, measured breath, the air burning slightly in his lungs. He felt the familiar knot of his tie against his throat and instinctively straightened it, a small, ingrained gesture of composure. How long? He asked, his voice low, steady, a surprising calm in the storm raging inside him. Susan's shoulders, initially stiff with defiance, sagged almost imperceptibly. She tried for a shrug, a casual dismissal, but it was stiff, unconvincing. 8 months, she said, her voice barely a whisper. The bravado suddenly drained from her. 8 months. John's mind worked quickly, brutally. 8 months of him staying late at the office, poring over contracts, trying to secure their future. 8 months of writing tuition checks for their daughter's private college, working to keep up the mortgage payments on this house, on this life she now deemed so boring. 8 months of planning their anniversary trip, canceled only last week due to a critical deadline. Does he know you're married? John asked, his gaze unwavering, fixed on her face. He needed to know the full depth of this, the layers of deceit. Another laugh, shorter this time, more of a sharp expulsion of air than actual amusement. It held no joy, only a brittle, defensive edge. Of course he knows, she said, almost scoffing. Her eyes flickered, avoiding his, settling on her own distorted reflection in the mirror. He's married too. The words landed with a dull thud, not a surprise perhaps, but a confirmation, a shared conspiracy. 2 lives entwined in deceit, while 4 others unknowingly built their worlds around the hollow core of their lies. A quiet resolve settled over John, a cold, hard certainty. The game was over. Get out, John said, his voice quiet, almost eerily calm. Each word was distinct, deliberate, carving its own space in the sudden silence of the room. Susan blinked, her eyes wide, the anger momentarily replaced by genuine shock. She hadn't anticipated this. "What?" she stammered, her voice thin and reedy. "Get out," he repeated, his gaze unwavering, cutting through her surprise. "Go to your hotel, go to Mark, I don't care. Just get out of my house." He emphasized my house, letting the possessive pronoun hang in the air like an accusation. "Your house?" she sputtered, a fresh wave of indignation rising. Her hands balled into fists at her sides. "This is my house, too. We built this together, John." John reached into his pants pocket, pulling out his smartphone. He unlocked it with his thumbprint, navigating through the banking app with practiced ease. The screen glowed, illuminating his calm, almost detached expression. "Is it?" he asked, not looking up from the phone. "Because I just transferred half of our savings to my personal account." He paused, his finger hovering over another menu. "The other half is still there for now, but by tomorrow morning, all our joint accounts will be frozen. Every single one." He looked up then, meeting her eyes, a cold, unyielding resolve in his own. Susan stared at John, her face, meticulously made up for another man, now contorted into a mask of pure rage. The bright red lipstick, still smudged on her cheek, seemed to bleed into the anger in her eyes. The polished veneer she presented to the world had cracked, revealing a raw, ugly fury beneath. "You can't do that!" she shrieked, her voice high and thin, disbelief warring with outrage. Her hands clenched at her sides, nails digging into her palms. "I can, and I did," John replied, his voice a low, even murmur that held no satisfaction, only a stark statement of fact. He looked at her, truly looked at her, for what felt like the first time in years. "You want to feel alive, Susan? Well, congratulations. Life's about to get very interesting for you." His words were flat, devoid of emotion, yet they carried a weight that made her flinch. She snatched her small, new purse from the counter, her movements jerky and violent. Her hands, which usually moved with such delicate precision, were visibly shaking, betraying the control she tried so desperately to maintain. She clutched the bag to her chest like a shield. "You'll regret this," she hissed, her voice thick with venom. "You have no idea what you're doing." Her eyes burned, but he saw the flicker of panic behind the fury. John merely took a step back, creating a wider path between him and the bathroom door. He made no move to stop her, to appease her, or to argue. "Neither do you," he said, his voice cutting through her rage like a fine blade. "Say hi to Mark for me." It was a casual dismissal, a final pointed jab that landed squarely. Susan recoiled, her face twisting further. She spun on her heel, the red dress rustling, and stormed out of the bathroom. Her heels clicked angrily against the hardwood floor of the bedroom, each sharp report echoing down the stairs, a staccato rhythm of her furious exit. John remained still, listening to the sounds fade, marking her progress through the house. The rhythmic click-clack grew fainter, then ceased as she reached the bottom landing. He heard a rustling sound as she likely grabbed her coat, then the sharp, decisive slam of the front door. A moment later, the distant rumble of her car engine starting, tires crunching on the gravel driveway, then the receding whine as she pulled out onto the street and drove away. Only when the last sound had vanished into the quiet suburban evening, leaving behind a hollow, deafening silence, did John's own legs give out. The sudden release of tension was physical, overwhelming. He sank onto the edge of the cold porcelain bathtub, the ceramic cool against his thighs. He sat there, hunched, his head in his hands, the weight of the last 20 minutes pressing down on him. 20 years of shared moments, of building a home, raising a daughter, of the quiet, unspoken understanding that had once bound them. 20 years of memories, of anniversaries and birthdays, of lazy Sunday mornings and frantic holiday preparations. All of it tainted now, like a once clear stream muddied by a sudden, violent storm. He thought he had known her, truly known her, but the woman who had just left was a stranger in a bright red dress. He sat there a long time, the music from the bathroom still playing, a cruel, ironic soundtrack. Etta James sang "At Last," her voice soaring, full of joy and devotion, words that now felt like a mockery. The grief in him was immense, a heavy stone, but beneath it, a cold, hard rage began to smolder. It wasn't the explosive kind, but a quiet, controlled fire that burned deep. His pain, initially a blinding agony, slowly began to crystallize into something colder, more resolute. It was shaping itself into a purpose. He had been blindsided, betrayed, and humiliated. But he was not broken. He considered the crumbling pieces of his marriage, the choices made, the paths taken. Every decision, every indulgence, every oversight now seemed to carry a heavy price. It was a lesson hard learned, a cold reality. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. John remained on the cold edge of the bathtub, the echoes of Etta James' voice slowly fading from the quiet house. He pictured Susan in her flashy red dress, speeding away into the night, convinced she had delivered the final devastating blow. She likely believed he was shattered, caught unaware, left to pick up the pieces of a life she'd simply walked away from. She thought she held all the power, that she had blindsided him and left him reeling, a pathetic figure abandoned in his own home. But she had no idea what was truly coming. He pushed himself up, the stiffness in his knees a physical manifestation of the last 20 minutes. He reached into his pocket again, pulling out his phone. This time, there was no frantic search for receipts. He opened his contacts, the illuminated screen casting a pale light on his face. He scrolled past family, past colleagues, past names he hadn't thought about in years, until he found the one he was looking for. Tom Davies, his old roommate from state, now a senior partner at one of the biggest law firms in Milwaukee, specializing in divorce settlements. A shark, some called him, but a fair one. Always precise, always effective. John pressed the call button. The phone rang once, then twice, the mechanical sound piercing the silence. This call wasn't about raw, emotional vengeance. It was the deliberate beginning of a calculated plan, a measured, precise distribution of consequences. He was no longer a victim. He was the architect of a new, stark reality. His moves would be deliberate, cold, and utterly effective. The phone continued to ring, a steady, rhythmic hum against John's ear. Each beat was a measure of time, not just passing, but being actively shaped. The initial shock had receded, leaving behind a cold, clear space in his mind where emotion usually resided. He wasn't dwelling on anger or hurt now. Those feelings felt distant, almost irrelevant. What mattered was the next step, the methodical unraveling. The life he had known, the one he had meticulously built over 2 decades, was gone, undeniably so. But a new foundation, however stark and unwelcome, could still be laid. He would not be the one left scrambling in the aftermath. He would arrange things precisely. There would be paperwork, difficult conversations, the methodical untangling of shared finances and property. He had been caught unaware, yes, but that didn't mean he couldn't see the intricate path ahead. It was a path of calculated moves, a quiet dismantling. He would ensure that the consequences, carefully measured, found their rightful place for everyone involved.